Joining me here on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line is so much going on in the NBA. Joker did, in fact, win the MVP award, as we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, and the playoffs are just so tight and so intense. The ESPN senior NBA writer and the Hoop Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective podcast host, Brian Windhorst, back here on the show. How you doing, Brian?
Hey, Rich, how are you?
I'm hanging in there. Let's just jump into it real quick. Let's start with the news of the day that the Joker is going back to back. I know you had mentioned in your last appearance here that this is your sense of the way things were going, but do you agree with this assessment?
I mean, I voted for Embiid, but I knew Jokic was going to win. I will be interested to see when the voting is released. My guess is that it won't be that close if I'm making, quotation marks with my hands. I don't think it'll. I think Giannis and Embiid will probably get about a third of the votes, and I think Jokic will get 60% to 2/3. Jokic was terrific throughout the season, and his statistics, his advanced statistics, really are powerful. I believe Embiid's defense and his ability to do so many different things on offense was powerful for me for a team that had a better record. But with where we are in the NBA right now, what Jokic does is highly valued, and he's certainly a worthy MVP. It's just not my pick.
Yeah, I mean, every sport goes through this when the announcement occurs during the playoffs. The NFL, as you know, makes its announcement the night before the Super Bowl. Any sense that we'll ever see the NBA maybe wait till the playoffs are finished before making the vote cast? Because Embiid, with his, absence and then presence over the first 4 games of this Sixers Heat series, I think has proven his value, to say the least. Right?
Yeah, and they used to do that. They used to have an awards show after the finals where they announced all the awards and everybody came and there was a red carpet and everything. And the show wasn't that good, and it almost made it worse, Rich, because then the voting was, 3 months stale instead of a month stale. And so they've ended up trashing that and going back to announcing it throughout the playoffs. It's always awkward, I have to say, and it's happened a handful of times. Well, not a handful, maybe 2 or 3 times in the last 20 years. It's always awkward when they award the MVP and the MVP is done playing. And not only that, but it wasn't an upset. The one year where Dirk Nowitzki won, they were the number 1 overall seed and got stunned in the first round by the We Believe Warriors. That was a historic upset. In this case, I believe Jokic is already back in Serbia. I mean, his season ended and he went home days ago because this was not unexpected. So, I mean, certain people will have a problem with that, but that is the way it is with the NBA right now. What Jokic does on a nightly basis is highly valued.
Brian Windhorst from ESPN here on the Rich Eisen Show. So the Warriors and Grizzlies series has been nasty, obviously, where both teams are now accusing a member of the opposition of breaking a code. Dylan Brooks breaking a code on breaking Gary Payton II's elbow, and now Jordan Poole breaking a code by grabbing at Ja Morant's knee in Game 3. That it looks like that's going to keep him out of Game 4. Do we know for sure if that was the moment where Morant hurt his knee? Brian?
That's what the Grizzlies say, and I guess I'll take them at their word. Quite frankly, I think it's ridiculous. I feel terrible that Ja got hurt, and he's such an important player to them, and the way he plays, sort of requires maximum health. He was being bothered by that knee down the stretch of the season. He took a couple of weeks off to rest it. Also, just a few minutes before that happened, he banged knees with Klay Thompson. Right. He was going to close out on a Klay Thompson shot, and as he landed, he crunched Klay's knee. I don't know. I will take them at their word, but with all due respect, it's preposterous that Jordan Poole was intending to hurt him. If you watch the play in real time, he's clearly just swiping at the ball. Of course, in slow motion, it looks like it was premeditated, but there's just no way you could look at it in real time. And the NBA agrees. They looked at it. And, the foul that Dylan Brooks committed on Gary Payton was a dirty play. It did not need Steve Kerr to come out and say that he broke the code, but that obviously offended the Grizzlies, and the Grizzlies are very sensitive. They're very excitable and very sensitive. You say anything or look at them sideways, their chests get out and they defend each other, and I like it. I don't want them to stop doing it, but it's gotten a little bit ridiculous. They need to just settle down a little bit and focus on the game. At the end of all of that, if they don't have Ja, they don't have a chance. So I hope that the need gets to a position where he can play. But this has not actually been, other than that one Dylan Brooks foul, it's not actually been a particularly dirty or overly physical series. It's just been a series of a lot of talking because people have gotten into their feelings.
Well, and then flagrant twos, right? And each team that got a flagrant two wound up winning the game. So that's just, I guess that's what's getting.
Yeah, but Draymond Green's flagrant two, it wasn't like that was an egregious, oh my
right.
God, how dare you play. I'm covering the Bucks Celtics series right now. These guys are slamming each other. These guys are flopping all over. It is the nature of the NBA that the series are like this. It's just the Grizzlies, I feel bad, but they just need to calm down a little bit. And, I just didn't like them campaigning for a suspension. And I didn't think Steve Kerr needed to campaign for a suspension either. But in the case of the Brooks foul, it was not questionable. It was clearly going to be a suspension. And so I think it's a little bit below the Grizzlies as the quality of people they are to go and campaign for something like that. I just didn't like it.
Before we get to the Bucks and the Celtics series that you say you're covering, what best of your knowledge happened behind the bench in Dallas yesterday with CP3 and his family and his mom on Mother's Day? What happened?
I don't know, but he was obviously very upset about it. He was upset about. I mean, they showed during the broadcast him, calling to police and pointing it. It's very strange based on the video I saw of the fan being removed that the fan appeared to be, first off, relatively young with his family. I mean, I don't know the situation, but it appeared like he might have been a teenager with his mother and brother. I don't know for sure. And also, like, directly behind the Suns bench. Those are surprising circumstances. It's very unfortunate that, because Chris was very upset about it, both in the moment and then afterward. So what I would say is that there are literally tens of thousands of cameras in an NBA arena during the game. Whatever happened, I'm sure that the Mavericks will be able to find on someone's video or their own video, and whatever happened, it will properly be handled. It is unfortunate that Chris and his family felt that way.
Well, I mean, and Chris had the ability to maybe personally witness it because he spent a ridiculous amount of time on the bench. Yeah. I mean, because of the foul trouble that he was in. And what does the NBA make of all that? I mean, because fans think that it's rigged to make sure that these series go long, right? And we I don't know what to say other than the fact that you hear coaches and players say as much as they've been saying. Draymond saying, I make a ton of money, so I'll just, flip people off, but the officiating seems to be front and center again, just like every year. Is there an issue, Brian Windhorst?
So a couple of things going on. First off, all of these series are tight, Rich. So we have two series that are 2-2 and two series tonight that are 2-1. We could have 4 2-2 series. All these series are tight. That's so in a tight series, the officiating matters. Each individual call holds more value. Secondly, we have I don't want to use the word epidemic because it hurts all of us. We have an incredible amount of flopping happening in the NBA right now. It's even more egregious than it's been in previous years. And this is not an original concept, but the Boston Celtics defensive strategy on Giannis is to draw him into charges and flop. It's on their board. It's not a secret. They're flopping like crazy. We have offensive players flopping. We have defensive players flopping. We have players doing, with the decision that the league has now, where they're reviewing potential flagrants. We got European soccer breaking out left and right, where a guy goes down and he lays there, rolls around waiting for the red card, the flagrant foul, to try to goad the officials to go over and look at it. Now, look, I'm not saying that there haven't been times where a guy gets clocked in the head by an elbow and totally gets his bell rung and is actually badly injured and chipped a tooth or whatever. And like, obviously that still happens. It's the playoffs, but we are definitely seeing a wave of attempts to manipulate the officiating. And so when you have it being rewarded, flopping is being rewarded regularly. When you have that happening, the fans get on edge, and the fans get on edge makes the players on edge, and it builds on itself. Part of it is why we like the playoffs. Everybody cares. The players care so much. The fans care so much. All of these things are, factors in it. So in the case of Chris Paul got caught in some of his own games. Chris is a very smart player, and for decades now has baited other players into fouling him. And Luka Doncic flopped on a play right before the end of the half. Chris bumped him in the air, and Doncic, 6'8" of him against 6'1" Chris Paul, flailed onto the ground. And then when Doncic got the call, he was cheering for himself and laughing. And then early in the second half, Chris Paul tried to bait Jalen Brunson into a transition foul where he jumped in front of him and stopped. And the officials called it an offensive foul because it's not allowed. And so Chris Paul was getting a dose of his own medicine. And I would say why he would try those moves when he was in foul trouble is not a typical way that he acts. So you can go frame by frame and say that this was a bad call or that was a bad call, but Chris knows in his heart of hearts that he made a bad set of decisions and he hurt his team's chances to win. And so knowing that about Chris and knowing the kind of competitor he is, I would expect him to play much better and differently for the rest of the series.
And the cynic in me, as I tweeted out, what's the over-under on number of fouls Luka has by halftime of this next game? 4 or 5? I mean, do you know what I'm saying? That's the general sense you're getting. I don't mean to be a cynic, but that's just the general sense that you're going to get.
Right, yeah. That's the game that is played. And so, in this series, again, that I'm covering, this Bucks Celtics series,
yes,
the Celtics felt like they were wronged at the end of the game on Saturday because Marcus Smart was fouled and he was only awarded 2 free throws instead of 3.
Correct.
And the Celtics came out and, complained about it vociferously. And the Bucks got worried that the Celtics' complaints were going to lead to the officials calling fouls on them. So their general manager, John Horst, came out last night and presented a dossier of calls in an interview that he gave The Athletic and saying, we were actually the ones wronged. And I say, a pox on all your houses. It's hard enough to officiate games at this level in general. Again, when these series are so tight, all these calls matter so much. I am annoyed by the baiting of the officials with the flopping and the laying on the ground and now the negotiating, in between series. One player was made available to the media in between games 3 and 4 of this Celtics Buck series. It was George Hill, who was a backup who's played 1 game in a month. And yet we have both sides issuing multi-layer political wars on the officiating. I don't like it. I can say that I don't like it, and it doesn't mean the officials get every call right, but I think they all reap what they sow by focusing more on the calls than they are about playing the game the straight-up way. If Chris Paul played straight-up basketball yesterday, I don't know if they'd have won the game, but he would have been in it to the end.
A few more minutes left with Brian Windhorst of ESPN here on the Rich Eisen Show. So you say you're covering the Celtics and the Bucks, and obviously the Celtics have been an incredible story, certainly in the last several months of this season, and Tatum with his rising superstar ascension being front and center. That said, what is it like to watch Giannis up close as he is doing what he's doing?
It reminds me of LeBron. I mean, they're different players, but Rich, I covered so many playoff series with LeBron against the Celtics. And I know that the teams are different now. It's not the same players.
Sure.
But, when I'm going into TD Garden for game 1 on a Sunday afternoon, I mean, I've done this many, many times. And I'm watching a Celtics team that probably has the better team, especially with Chris Middleton out with injury right now. And I'm watching the Bucks have the best player. And I'm watching the best player just will his team to victory. Some nights when he's got his shot working, some nights when things are going against him. And it reminds me of LeBron. And, Giannis doesn't have the same talent package that LeBron does. I mean, LeBron is more skilled than Giannis. is or probably ever will be. I mean, LeBron can do some more things offensively. But in terms of like, look, I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to enforce my will on the game, and you can't do anything about it. It's like watching LeBron. And why shouldn't it be? Giannis is in his mid-20s with two MVPs and a Finals MVP. This is the kind of resume LeBron had. And so, it's the same thing in the Dallas Phoenix series. The Dallas has the worst team. I don't say worst, but Phoenix is the better team. Dallas has the best player. You know how many times LeBron won series when he had the lower seed? When he went to the finals those 8 years in a row, I think he was the number one seed maybe once or twice. He was always winning series when they didn't have home court advantage because he would come into a building and he would take the other team by the throat and he would put them down on the ground until they submitted. And not every game, sometimes a few times the Celtics with the better team did beat them, but he got it done most of the time. So when you look at the NBA and you look at why these teams tank and beg and borrow and steal and tamper and make 11-year plans to get the star player, this is why. Because you got a player like this, it changes everything. And so right now, I think the Celtics can win the title. I still feel like they can win the title. I think if they win tonight's game, they very well might win the series. But I look at Giannis and say, good luck 4 out of 7 on anybody. He can beat any team 4 out of 7. I don't care who they are because he's that great.
Before I let you go, Brian Windhorst, what is going on in LeBron world right now? We've seen a lot of tweeting during the games.
I know.
What's going on in LeBron world? Here we are, mid playoffs.
LeBron obviously misses it. Obviously is very disappointed in the season, but loves his life and loves living in Los Angeles and loves being a Laker. And I think he wants to make the most of it. They believe that with a couple of tweaks, they can be right back on top. If he's healthy and AD is healthy and they, change the point guard position, whether that's replacing Westbrook or getting another player in there so the Westbrook doesn't have to do it as much, they think they can be right back on top. I don't necessarily agree with that, but LeBron's still one of the great players in the league, and I'm sure he sees Giannis doing this, and he thinks, I can still do that, and he might not be wrong. So, but he, with 4 titles and all these MVPs and all his gold medals and all of his records, and he's going to be the all-time leading scorer in the next year, I think he values going home at the end of the games and being happy. And he is, even with the losses in Los Angeles, he is happy. I don't think he wants to go anywhere, and I don't think he will go anywhere in the short term.
Well, I mean, your friend and colleague and mine and Stephen A. certainly created a nice little kerfuffle over the 48 hours leading into the weekend, talking about LeBron maybe should be traded by the Lakers.
Well, there's nothing to stop the Lakers from doing it. And, if you gave the situation to a computer, the computer might suggest trading LeBron. I mean, and we could sit here for the next 20 minutes and talk about places where LeBron could be traded that could potentially swing the title, where LeBron could be on a title contending team. Those would all be true, and maybe that could happen. And a big factor in all of this is that LeBron has an extension decision with the Lakers. They have to offer it, and he's got to sign it. And if neither of those happen and he's on a 1-year contract come next season, we got a real discussion. But if the question is whether LeBron wants to be a Laker or doesn't believe in the roster, doesn't the team, I don't get that feeling at all. I think he does believe that they can turn it around, even though I'm not on that page. I think he does want to be a Laker. Let's see, how that all works out.
Brian, thanks for the call, as always. Look for mine again. I always appreciate you coming on. You make me smarter. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Enjoy your week.
You too. That's at Windhorst ESPN on both Twitter and Instagram. Brian Windhorst in the Hoop Collective podcast, ESPN senior NBA writer Brian Windhorst here on The Rich Eisen Show. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.